Welcome to Into the Valley of the Script, number 1. Today I'm going to teach you how to script, but teach you mainly about what each component of the script does. So let me get started on finding out if I am ready. Probably am. I think I'm live. Let me just check real quick. Yep, I'm live. Should be. Oh yeah, and it's excellent health too. Oh wow, 343. Reminds me of Halo. It reminds me so much of Halo. So let's get started. 342 now. Anyways guys, I'm going to show you the intro really soon. So let me get the word out. Interesting. Does it do that? Should. Yeah, I was just talking about the link. Trying to give everyone on the Discord the link. So, let's get started. Anyways, tell me in the chat, what do you want me to do? You want me to get started or not? Because right now I'm waiting for a few people to come on. Extraction mode giveaways will be in the next week. Or actually, they could be... What was last week? Was last week in March or last week in April? Probably in April. Yeah. I would believe that's in April. So, anyways, let's get started. Doesn't matter. Tell me if you can see anything. If you can't see anything, let me know. Okay, I'll get started right now. So let's get started. Find Robux. Oh, there it is. Okay. Here we go. Tell me if you can hear it. If you can, then you're good. But if you're not, then I don't know what happens. It's loading. Just give it a second. Give it a few seconds. Sorry about that. It's my neighbors. Sometimes they get crazy, but it doesn't matter. Right now I'm working on trying to get this part of the game finished. And it does use USFDP extensively. It requires that you do that in order to be able to fight, not just use a lightsaber, but also use that. And that's a motorcycle. It should be coming on any time now. Waiting. Hold on, guys. Still waiting for it to appear. It's kind of weird, though, that it wouldn't do. Oh, it did. It did. Okay, that's right. I forgot. I have to re-enable it. I will show you how that works in a moment. Just give me 1 second. So, in order to be able to do intros, it's most likely suggested that you use something sort of like replicated first. This is a script that's been disabled, and it puts the intro in. That's how Sabrefront's intro system is powered. And also another thing, it doesn't spawn your character until that intro is finished. You can skip the introductory storyline, or you can use something like that. It really depends on what you're doing. But anyways, let me get started on showing you this. This part that I've uncommented is the part that actually does it, and it's another loop. The loop says repeat wait 0.2 until key wait for child intro ran 1200 dot value equals true. Let me explain that further. Repeat, it means that it's going to do something until a certain condition is met. That's why it says repeat until, for simplicity. But the wait part tells it to wait for a certain amount of time, specifically in seconds. If you don't know what that is, you should probably look it up. But if you do, you're fine. I mean, everyone should know what it is if they seen it. Like, it's self-explanatory. But P wait for child is not self-explanatory. We don't know what P is yet. Actually, we do. Player added. Game.players, that player added means that whenever a player joins the game, it does something. So, the P is a parameter for player. Now, P wait for child intro ran means it's going to wait until it finds a child of the player, specifically something called intro ran. Intro ran is a tag specifically used to make sure that the intro has been ran. If it is, it won't run it anymore, and it definitely won't hold you in terms of the character spawning. Now the value part, now 1200 is also seconds as well, so it's supposed to wait for like 20 minutes for that, which is kind of long, so I'm probably going to decrease it a little bit, but I actually expanded it so that whenever you are ready, it does the thing. And then dot value means it's a bool value. So it has to find the value of it, which has to be set to true. Then it loads your character. Simple. Now I'm going to explain this in another intro or another into the value of the script episode, but right now we need to get started on the intro. So let's do it. Okay, so if you see this, you should see an intro screen coming up shortly. Now, do you hear any audio? There it is. There's audio playing. And by the way, that audio, I'm going to show you how that works in a moment. These are tips. The tips also use a loop, like repeat. And when I click play, something happens as well. I'm going to show you that too. Here comes the intro. This part uses for loop. Uses two for loops. One's nested, the other one's not. There's actually two for loops inside one that I will show you. New hope is spark the flame. See, it also uses a table to actually show you the text. So in case you need it, then hey. So now, if I wait for a few seconds, it should be able to come up. Yeah. Execute. Okay, here we go. They all switch to forward to use. Forward might be good. Yeah, take some time to do that. I'm probably going to fix that, but that's what I got so far. And this is the character setting. So you can select any of these characters for what you want to be. This only happens when you're like at level 1. Or something like that. So, yeah. That was the intro. Now let's get into the code of the intro. So let's see what we got. Let's see. Intro GUI, where are you? Ah, here you are. Let's go into main. So, as you can see here, this is the table of songs. The songs that are used for the intro before you click the button. Now there's a tips loop as well. But there's also another loop. This one doesn't use a loop. This one uses a sound thing. It uses that. So whenever the lobby sound ends playing, it always does another song. Wouldn't have to use a loop to do anything, unless you spawned one. But spawning is quite arbitrary, and not arbitrary, but it's quite awkward. The concept indicates from here that you want something that works with the intro, something that will make it less awkward, you know? What I mean by awkward, I mean as in it's bulky, it's too much, it prevents other things from running because of the fact that it's almost infinite. I mean, there are ways you can make it work without having to use lobby sound that ended, but still, lobby sound that ended is much more efficient because it actually detects when the sound has ended and picks another one. So, what about the tips loop? Well, the tips loop is a coroutine. Had to put that in a coroutine because here's the deal. You want the tips loop to be infinite, but not going to stop the rest of the code from running. That's where coroutines come in. From the coroutine, you can do multiple things, such as, for example, you can run other processes, you can possibly do some tweening with weapons, tweening with joints, tweening of anything, really. That's how USFBP was formed, via spawns. In fact, the reloading GUI animation in USFBP does use spawn or coroutine by wrap, whichever one. It actually uses coroutine that resilient because of the fact that it's a different coroutine. Spawn just makes it worse. But here's another repeat loop. This loop is used for loading. When things are loading, you want to make sure that you get the whole thing and not just one part of it. That's where the repeat loop comes in. And here's an if statement. It checks to see if the request queue size, which we're going to go over in the next episode probably, is greater than the queue. If it is, the queue is its size. Otherwise, it's just going to print out the other thing. It does it regardless, but still. And it does all of this until it's done loading everything. Basically, that's what that says. But when does that repeat loop run? If there is something to load. So, let's get started. I'm sorry about that, guys. I got a cold. I've been having the cold all week, and I've been trying to fight it, but I'm still in the fight. As you may see, I am talking like a regular person, even though it's hard to keep up because of the fact that my voice is a little different. So, let's get started on seeing what the rest of this intro has to offer. The next episode or next show that's coming up on this channel is the Dev Saber. It's going to be the rescheduled version. Probably going to show you what I got so far for this, but it will have to be around 3 o'clock because I have to fix some things. Anyways, here's a storyline. A storyline is an array, a table that uses numbers as keys, like an array. Sort of like C++. C++ uses arrays just like this. But sometimes they may use something very different called vectors. Now, what I learned in class is that vectors are very safe, are the much more safer versions of the arrays. They're very safe, trust me. If something breaks, it's probably because it's out of range. Or something else. Like they can detect it, and they usually doesn't throw an error. It usually doesn't throw an error. So this is a storyline, and then we have the intro frame, which is coroutine.create. This runs before the music because of the fact that we have to do it like that. You know, we have to make sure that it's in order, because when the music starts, or when the music gets to a certain point, it should be able to show the other frame, and then yield the intro. So, let's get started on looking at this. This uses a few things such as, for example, the number of stories in the line. 89 divided by the number of storylines or story things right here is what story time is. Like the time in which the story or that part of the story is shown. After that time is up, it fades away or fades in and then fades into another one. So story time divided by 2, and then the fade rate is fade time divided by 10, which is obviously what you would use to make it a little more fitting. And then I had to divide it by 4, the fade rate, because of the fact that it was supposed to be a little bit quicker. I use a lot of quality assurance in my projects and work. That way it can run faster. So here's a for loop. Here's a for each loop is for the storyline. It helps to actually, to actually show the storyline first. Now, but you have to do the storyline.text thing before you do the rest, because if you don't, then it might show up at the wrong time. It might change at the wrong time. You want it to show up like it did when you saw the intro. Now, another thing you want to do is a for loop to actually fade it out and fade it in. So I did for I equals 1, which is the start, 0, end, and then the interval is negative 0.0875. Just the right amount of time in that interval to actually fade each part out quickly, so that it can meet the deadline for stopping the whole coroutine, which is 89 seconds after the thing is started. So then it just, sets transparency to I, waits for that certain amount of time, and then it waits 6 seconds. Now it should be something else. Story time should have been included. Or actually, it's not story time, it should have been included. The phase rate was calculated from that, so 6 seconds is good. You want it to wait a certain amount of time so that the player can read it, but still be able to meet the deadline. See? Then we do another loop down here. This one goes from 1 to 89. 89. Basically, if the skipped intro is true, then the position is 89. Storyline is visible, coroutine.yield. Basically what this does is, first it checks to see if you press the skip button, which will in turn set that value right there, skip intro.value to true. Now if it is true, guess what it's going to do? It's going to set the position to a certain point in time in the soundtrack, or in the in the sound, so that you'll get to that point where it's like at its climax. Then the storyline is not visible anymore. I should have made that happen. In fact, I think I'm going to do that right now. Take this and put this right there. Like right there. And then after it does this, makes the storyline invisible, it cuts off the frame, or the intro frame coroutine. Otherwise, it's just going to wait 1 second, as always, until it gets to that point. This code down here is self-explanatory. It basically sets the thing to be visible or invisible. Or, yeah, sets this one to be visible and this one to be invisible. Then it waits 10 seconds, and this is another for loop that I'm going to show you. So, same thing as always. Interval is from 0 to 1, but it goes at an interval of 0.1 seconds. It waits very quickly. Waits 1,000th of a second, or actually not even 1,000th, a 10,000th of a second. And then it sets the transparency of the whole thing, of those two things, the logo and the background, to that value of I. And then if I is at a certain point, right, then here's what it will do. It will check to see if you just started the game. Player.leaderstats.level.value is your level. If you're at level 1, it meets the criteria there. But here's another thing. If your leader stats, specifically your XP value, hasn't even been touched, and remember, when EM2 gets released on Saber for Alternating Assault, coming April 30th, you will always get something, at least, if you play the game like you're supposed to. You know? Not trolling, trying to get PvP points or anything like that. Just trying to actually lead your men into battle. You'll most likely get points. Because the quest also gives you points. Yeah, if you reach that certain point, or the encounter point, you will get points from that quest. But then, here's what happens next. It will turn on the scripts that actually cause the character setup screen that I showed you in the little dry run of the intro. It will turn those scripts and sets those character setup on. Now after that thing has been checked and everything's been done, it will, regardless of whether it was true or not, set the intro ran thing to true. Basically, it'll tell the server, hey, I think this guy finished the intro, so can you at least load his character? And then after that, it will turn off chat. It will turn on chat, but I'm going to make it to where, in fact, I should do that. Or actually, I'm going to look inside of the, what am I going to look for? Oh yeah, I remember. What I'm looking for is to see if can users chat async is server side or client side. In fact, tell me in the chat, is that client side or server side? Let's see. In fact, let me just post a message right now. It is, can users chat async client side or server side? Because this is what I want to do. I want to make sure that when the player plays the game, Depending on its privacy settings, the chat is visible or not. If you don't have chat, you're going to have to do it with dialogues. But if you do, guess what you can do? You can use the chat commands. You will be able to do that with the comm link. The comm link is only for those who can chat. Simple as that. We don't want people who have the wrong privacy settings to be using the chat. So that will be changed. That is a mistake on my part not to check that. So, yeah. It's a just in case thing. I mean, a comm link will be destroyed if your chat settings are turned off. Like if your privacy settings are like very private, then it will be removed. And I will show you how to do that. How to remove an item that uses a certain chat-based technology, such as, for example, private messages, broadcasting chat, bubble chat, anything like that. That stuff, I'll show you how to literally remove that stuff that uses it from their inventory, if it's a tool, in the next episode. And by the time the next episode comes, there will be more on the screen besides the title and what I'm showing you. Anyways, let me get started. Next thing, here's another for loop, but it starts the volume. Why? Well, we want to turn down the volume to 0 of the sound. Once it gets to this point, like it goes down by this interval, and then it sets the volume to this, which is I, the rate, and then it waits 25 hundredths of a second. After that, that's it. It just waits 1 second, and then it just turns off the intro. Now here's something else you might want to look at. This was supposed to be a repeat loop that was supposed to be used to circle the camera around the player. However, it is very hard to turn off, so I decided not to do that. It would have been fun, but I didn't decide to do it. Now, here's another thing you want to learn about C-frames. The current camera C-frame will be the torso, the C-frame of the torso, times the angle in which is actually incremented to turn it round and round. So it'll be 0 math.rad angle 0 times cframe.new, which is almost like vector3.new, but instead of using a plus sign, it uses a multiplication sign, which will be 0, 0, and 10. So basically the z-axis, it will go out, you know, so you can at least see the character better. Now this was supposed to be good, but you know what happened. And then here's the character setup. Player GUI, wait for child, character setup, 600. Yeah, basically it just turns on the character setup thing once it's gotten all the variables. Now let's look at some module scripts. This is the thing that makes intro ran true. So first it has to wait for the child to appear. So it creates intro ran once it's done. Now when intro ran is true, it parents it to the player. Now, do we want to be actually doing this on the client? Probably not, because we want the server to access it. Then again, it could be client side and nothing else to access it except the server, because guess what? That will prevent any exploiters from trying to actually do something with the intro ran so that they can keep the player from entering the game. It keeps rivalries down to a minimum. You know? You want to keep rivalries down to a minimum. So that you can make sure that they don't do anything stupid. So, yeah. Anyways, that's Intro Manager. Color trans, basically what this is that it basically transitions the color or lerps it. Now you can't do lerp lerping of colors in Roblox, but you can do it in Unreal Engine, which is no surprise, but then again, it is kind of like a surprise. You know, you can also do it in Unity as well. So here's what I did. I put all the code into a function. Function color transition base C1, C2. So first you need something to actually transition the color with. That's what base is for. Then you need to and then here we go with this 0, 1 color trans at speed. This makes it pretty fast. And 0.2 works the best, by the way. So the base color is color3.new c1.r times 1 times I. Basically, this is all lerping. And I'll probably show you lerping and research it myself. So, yeah. Anyways, this is the color transition thing. Here are the tips. Now, the tips are organized by class. Now, Rebels, we have Jedi, we have Bounty Hunters. We don't have Imperials yet. Imperials will be in by the end of the month when the game is supposed to be released. But this is basically what it does. Now, these tips are going to change as well based on the class because some of it is actually crap, in my opinion. I'm not going to say the S word, I'm not going to say BS, because really, that's not what I do here. I'm here as a professional game designer trying to teach you how to script like I script, or better. Now, this, you want to make sure that the tips are making sense and that there's not too many of them, because if there's too many of them, it's just too much information. Now, there's ones for Bounty Hunters, Jedi, and Rebels. Rebels have weapons that are not lightsabers, so that's why they have the last one saying reloading is slower than pulling out a secondary weapon. Jedi are different. They have a lot of information to cover because they were the first ones in the game. Bounty Hunters, not needed. Well, actually it is needed, but still some of the information in it is not needed. And then all is just universal information. Now, it will give a tip like this. We'll put the tip.text to tips class ID. Basically, you have to provide a class and an ID in the function. Those parameters. The class goes first because, as you can see here, that's how it's structured. And then the ID is basically the index in which it's in terms of where it's at. For example, Jedi 1 would be press E and select dual lightsaber to start fighting with new physics, which I am going to change. Now, to tips enabled means you're returning script.parent.tips enabled by value. This thing. This is a bool value that determines if the tips are enabled. And it also is used in while loop. Now, tips.tipLength is basically returns this, the number of tips in the class. So basically, there you have it for tips. So yeah. Now let me show you another thing I did. If you want to use a simple button click, or you want to do something simple in events, here's something you can do. You can make a mouse button one-click thing, or basically an event handle that handles when you click a button. So for example, script.parent.mouse button one-click connect function. What that does is whenever you click the skip button, that comes right after you click the play button, it's going to set the skip intro value, which is this thing right here, it's true, and then it's going to make that button invisible. There's also a drop shadow here, as you can see. Tutorial code was supposed to be used for tutorials, but instead I decided to get rid of it. Just like any other thing that was crap in this game. Now, color trans is used for this. Now, when you click on the button, all this is done. There's some loops that we're going to look at. For loops and another for loop. Now, gameplay requested is just a debug thing. So then we make play.visible equal to false. And then we do for I equals 1, 0, 0.01, which should have been different, in my opinion. I don't know why that didn't happen, but it did. Let me think for a second. I know what the problem is. Could it be this? Oh, wait, it could work without it. It'll be fine. But it sets the transparency to this, and then it waits 1/10 of a second. Now, the color transition is the for loop in itself, but this is what the color we're using. All black. Why? Because some stuff may not be suitable as where this thing is 25, 25, 25. So, yeah. And then this, back to that background color theory. Yeah. The next for loop is for I equals GUI.LobbySound.volume. Basically the same thing as the other thing with the volume in the intro run, but very different. It literally turns down the volume of the sound you hear when you first enter the game. Stops the sound after that loop is done, and then it enables the intro run script. It starts the intro run script, basically. So yeah. Now tips, as we know, is just a frame. Skip button is good. Sounds, those are for like buttons things. Let me show you this. Now this is for each loop, but I did it differently for optimizational purposes. So for underscore v in next vi, basically optimization, you know, that kind of thing. Sort of like a, yeah, sort of like a, forgot what it was. Gosh. But I forgot that this was, next VI was something like in pairs, but VI is this parameter. So basically this is a table. Now if V is a GUI object, meaning that if it's a frame, button, image button, text, etc., then if it's a GUI button, or button that you can actually press whether image button or not, whenever you enter it, it's going to play that sound where it enters. But if you click on it, it's going to play another sound. Otherwise, if it's a frame, it's going to do a recursion thing. Now let me show you what recursion is. Recursion is when you're calling a function inside of the same function. So basically, we're trying to recursively set up audio feedback on all the buttons in the GUI. Is that very easy? I don't think so. Is it a good idea? Yes. So, then set up audio feedback is called down here on the GUI itself, but specifically the table of children inside of that GUI. So there you have it. That's the intro GUI remastered. If you have any questions or whatnot, tell me in the comments of this video on YouTube when it gets to YouTube. My name is Eranos12, and I will see you back at 2:30 or 3 o'clock for the Dev Saver.